For those of you who don't know, Libras are the best. I'm just going to say that. But it's my birthday month. Yes, I am an October baby, but that is not why I love opal. And we will be getting into that very, very soon. I am so excited. Oh, this is going to be, amazing. Hold on to your pearls. So, by 1988, we had cut several large gemstones of different variety and species. At about this time, 3 of the largest, finest rutile quartz crystals were being unearthed in Brazil. Rumor had it they were the 3 largest, finest optical quartz crystals to be discovered in Brazil in the last 150 years. One weighed 1,800 pounds. The second weighed 800 pounds. That would eventually become Bahia. And the third weighed 500 pounds. Stones of this size are extremely rare, and I have been told that crystals of this size and clarity are discovered only once in a century or so. Like so many things in life, one's path takes you in directions you can't always fully understand at the time you're traveling them, but in the future, it all seems to make sense, and the skills come together in a synergy that allows one to lift to new heights in one's life. At this time, Lawrence and I were receiving recognition for being able to sculpt these large, rare pieces through a relationship Lawrence had developed with a Brazilian whose family was one of the largest optical quartz mineral dealers that sold then high-grade quartz to the electronic industry. And the owners came to us to cut their stones. They offered us a partnership with them to cut and sell what would eventually become known as Bahia. History was in the making. Just when the two of us had perfected the skill in cutting such large gemstones, Mother Nature would reveal and expose these extremely rare wonders of nature at the same time. To this, I always reflect on this historical synchronicity. Those 2 kids who grew up in California with no family history in gemstones, practicing and honing the art of large gemstone cutting, paralleled at the same moment that Mother Nature would reveal and expose one of the finest rutilated optical quartz crystals ever in history. Call it fortune, call it magic, it all came together in that year. This is a journey and story of how this magnificent large rare crystal was first discovered, then late carved by Lawrence and myself. This is Bahia's story of how it would be transformed into the world's largest, finest optical hanging gemstone that now adorns the entrance to the Gemological Institute of America's campus in California for humanity to admire and be inspired by for generations to come. As the story has it, it was 1987, and farmers in the state of Bahia, Brazil, were clear-cutting the forest in order to farm, raise cattle, and grow coffee. What they would do is gather up all the fallen trees and brush in a large pile and light a fire to burn and clear the land. It was during one of these nights that the farmers noticed a bright shining light off in the distance reflecting the fire. The farmers knew what this could be in Brazil, recognized for its rare mineral wealth. So in the morning, they got up and went over to where they saw that shining reflection in the forest. A small peak of determination from one of these crystals was sticking just above the surface. Stopping all work on clear cutting, they began to unearth this crystal. It took over 2 weeks to dig around it, only to discover that there were 3 very large crystals together. The largest weighed 1,800 pounds, another weighed 500 pounds, and what came to be known as Bahia weighed 800 pounds in the rough. When word got out about these extremely large and clear pieces, a family in Brazil who deals in this type of material were notified and offered to purchase the 3 stones. The discovered location was literally miles from any paved or dirt road. To get to this location was not easy. First, one had to fly by small airplane, then ride by horseback to travel to this remote area to inspect the stone. In order to get these stones out, the farmers needed to roll it out using log wheels from the forest for miles to the nearest road where it could be then transported to the city. Since Lauren and I by this time had built a reputation for carving such large pieces, the son of this quartz dealer, whom Lawrence knew, came to us and offered a partnership with us. We could choose which of the two larger pieces we wanted to work on. We decided on the 800-pound piece because it was optical from top to bottom and double terminated, plus half of the material of the 1800 rough was included. When one buys a rough stone and half is milky or included, one needs to calculate the weight loss so one has a clear picture of how much of the rough is actually cuttable. This can affect the price of the rough. The large 1800 piece was eventually sold to my fellow and good friend Munstenier, who would cut the stone that would become known as Metamorphosis, a 212-pound sculpture, along with several other smaller sculptures from the cut of pieces. Bahia was extremely rare in that it was optical from tip to double terminated tip. Lawrence and I were determined to cut it as one piece and retain as much of the original size and weight. When the stone was uncrated in California, you could not see its full clarity because a thick half-inch layer of clay matrix was baked into the surface of the stone. After 8 hours of sawing the first front cut to reveal the clarity, we could see two parallel cleavage plane cracks along the rhombohedral direction of the quartz termination. But as the cleavages were just entering partly into the stone, not creating a major crack, we felt we could work around these flaws and integrate it into the design of the stone. If one looks up in mineral books about cleavage in quartz, almost every mineralogy book will tell you quartz does not have a cleavage. The truth is every cutter who works in quartz will tell you differently. It is not what is called a distinct cleavage, where in most cases one could physically hammer it to separate the stone along its cleavage planes. A cleavage plane in minerals is where the molecules have the weakest electromagnetic bond. Thus it tends to break in straight, even, flat planes when a physical or thermal shock is induced, like those pictures one thinks of when you see a diamond cutter split the diamond evenly by hammer. In quartz, it is what is called an indistinct cleavage, in that it is activated by thermal shock. This means if the stone is very warm and you lower the temperature too quickly, it will crack along these perfect planes. And inversely, if the stone is cold and you heat it up too fast, it will crack along the cleavage plane as well. After removing the clay surface from the large prism face of the crystal, we could see two parallel cleavages along the rhombohedral plane of the quartz. As we started grinding and sanding the large front face of the stone, one could see the cleavage cracks creep along in the stone, getting worse as we proceeded. Because so much heat was being generated on such a large gemstone, there was no way to control the cleavage from growing. This was such a major setback at the time. We were so focused on keeping it intact as one large gemstone that when the cleavage planes kept growing, we were devastated. All of a sudden, we could feel our dream of cutting such a large stone being dashed. I often compare the emotion as being like a death of a close loved one. You just have this most awful, sinking, painful feeling in your stomach. We just did not know what to do. For a time, it appeared we were going to end up with 3 separate, smaller, less significant gem sculptures. Having already spent several months and hundreds of hours working on our revolutionary masterpiece, we were looking at 3 stones instead of 1. We were so upset at the time that we had to take a step back from the piece for over 6 months. We felt that we no longer had this great, very large piece of gemstone. This time away from the stone turned out to be a blessing in disguise. It was during this time away from the actual work that Lawrence, his wife Suni, along with myself and my wife Sharon, would sit around and try and dream about what we should do. It was during this sabbatical that an aha moment occurred. As we took a step back, we came to the conclusion that we now had to cut the stone into 3 sections, but somehow remain determined to keep it as a single sculpture. This forced us to push the creative envelope out further and come up with a very